Don't come home. Rosa's voice was barely louder than the road beneath my tires, but those 3 words made me pull over so fast my seatbelt locked across my chest. What happened? Not here, she whispered. Open the bedroom camera. And please don't call him. My husband had told me he was in a meeting downtown. But when the live feed loaded, Evan was standing beside our bed. A man I had never seen before placed a prescription bottle next to a half-filled glass of wine. My mother-in-law, Margaret, walked into frame carrying a thick folder. Then I saw Rosa's shadow move near the laundry room door. She was still inside. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me this in the comments. Would you have driven straight home, or stayed hidden and kept watching? I stayed. Margaret handed the stranger several pages. Evan smoothed the bedspread, adjusted the wineglass, then looked toward the hallway as if he expected someone to walk in and discover everything. My phone vibrated. A message from Evan appeared over the camera feed. Still an hour away, sweetheart? I watched him type it while standing in our bedroom. My hands went cold, but I answered the way he expected. Traffic is slow. I'll text when I'm close. He read my reply, showed it to the stranger, and nodded. That was when I understood this was not an affair. It was not a private family meeting. They were preparing something before I arrived. I enlarged the image. The bottle was not mine. The handwriting on the page was not mine either. But my name was written across the top. Margaret placed an envelope bearing Evan's company logo beside what looked like part of my military health record. The stranger checked his watch and said something I could barely hear. Enough to prove it. Enough to prove what? Evan had spent months telling people I was exhausted from Navy duty. He had started asking whether I slept, whether I forgot things, whether I felt overwhelmed. I had mistaken those questions for concern. Now they sounded like preparation. What they did not know is that I noticed timestamps before I noticed excuses. I saved the original feed without touching it, copied it to a second location, and recorded the exact minute Evan sent his message. Then I guided Rosa toward the side exit. The camera flickered. Margaret reached toward the lens. The screen went black. But the file had already been saved. I did not drive home. I did not call Evan. And I did not let him know that, for the first time in our marriage, I had seen the story he was writing about me before he could make anyone believe it. I waited with my eyes fixed on the phone until it finally rang. I'm out, Rosa whispered. I'm 2 streets away. For several seconds, I couldn't answer. I just listened to her breathing through the phone. It reminded me how frightened she really was. She had risked her job. Maybe much more than that. And somehow she was still worried about me instead of herself. That realization stayed with me long after the call ended. Only then did I let myself breathe. You did the right thing, I said. No, Mrs. Bennett. I should have told you sooner. This isn't your fault. Right now, I need you safe. She apologized again, her voice shaking. She was terrified Evan would blame everything on her if he discovered she had called me. I asked only one question. Did you change anything? No. I left exactly as it was. Good. Don't delete anything. Don't edit the video. Keep your phone with you. There was a long silence before Rosa spoke again. I kept thinking maybe I was imagining things. But today, I knew they were waiting for you. We met at a small coffee shop far from my neighborhood. Rosa looked exhausted, but once she started talking, she never exaggerated a single detail. She separated everything carefully. What I saw, what I heard, and what I only suspected. Months before that call, she had noticed Margaret searching the cabinet where I kept personal files whenever I was away on Navy duty. Evan had started asking strange questions about my deployment schedule, pretending he wanted to surprise me with dinners. Then envelopes from a private clinic began appearing on the kitchen counter. Once, she even saw the same man from my bedroom walking through the house while I was working an overnight shift. I never saw him again, Rosa said quietly. Until today. I felt another piece of the puzzle fall into place. Whatever they had planned had not begun that afternoon. It had been growing quietly for months. Rosa had been afraid of losing her job. I was beginning to understand that I might already have lost my marriage. I gave Major Lena Cho the original camera file without telling her what I believed it showed. She watched it twice. Then she looked at me. "You didn't trim this?" "No." "Change the format?" "No." "Good." She sealed the original and logged the transfer time. Watching her seal that evidence felt strangely calming. For hours, every decision had depended on me alone. Now at least one part of the truth existed somewhere Evan could not quietly erase. I didn't feel safe. But for the first time, I stopped feeling completely alone. For the first time that day, something connected to my life was beyond Evan's reach. Lena rested her hand on the evidence bag for a second. "Whatever this becomes," she said quietly, "you're not facing it alone." "You handled this carefully," she said. "More carefully than most people would." I knew one mistake could make it useless. Lena studied me for a moment, but did not ask why. "I can protect the military side of this," Lena said. "Nothing beyond that." "That's all I'm asking." "Then don't confront him. The moment Evan knows you have this, everything else may disappear." We moved through the footage one detail at a time. "You think there's more?" I asked. "I think this took too much preparation to begin with one video." Then Lena stopped on the frame showing part of my health record. Until that moment, I had been afraid of what Evan was planning. Now I was afraid of what he already possessed. Her expression changed. "That should not be outside the system." Lena requested an access review. Most of my service file remained restricted, but one approval line was visible. H. Ward. I knew the name. I also knew Evan should never have been close enough to that record to see it. The video was safe. My records were not. And someone inside my marriage had known exactly where to look. I went home because Evan still believed I knew nothing. For the moment, that was the only advantage I had. The bedroom was spotless. The bottle was gone. The wine glass was gone. Even the bedspread had been smoothed back into place. Almost. One corner had been tucked beneath the mattress differently. They had erased the scene. They had not erased the mistake. I stood there a little longer. Anyone else would have believed nothing unusual had ever happened. That frightened me. Not because they had cleaned the room. Because they expected me to accept this version of reality without questioning it. Evan appeared in the doorway. "You look tired," he said. "Have you been sleeping?" "I'm fine." "Any trouble remembering things?" "Feeling overwhelmed." His voice sounded caring. The questions did not. I looked around the clean room and understood something I had missed before. Every answer I gave him could become another line in that file. He was not checking on me. He was repeating the language from the file. Lena returned to the frame showing the stranger holding the folder. "Pause there." I froze the image. The man's face was partly turned away, but a small logo was visible near the bottom of one page. Lena enlarged it until the letters became clear. Vale Behavioral Health. "Do you know that name?" she asked. "No." She checked through official channels while I watched the man on the screen. He had stood inside my bedroom with my records in his hands as if he belonged there. A few minutes later, Lena found the clinic. Dr. Simon Vale. The photograph on the clinic profile matched the man from the camera. That gave us a name. It did not tell us why he had been in my house. Lena searched for any authorized contact between Vale and me. There was nothing. No referral. No appointment. No consultation. "I've never met him," I said. "Then we need to understand what he wrote and where he got his information." A verified copy of the document arrived later that day. It looked official. My full name was printed at the top. Beneath it was an assessment of my sleep, memory, mood, and ability to manage stress. Vale described me as if he had spent hours studying me. But there was no consent form. No intake record. No clinical notes. No evidence that I had ever entered his office. Then I reached a sentence about the guilt I felt whenever Navy duty kept me away from home. I stopped reading. I had said almost those exact words once. Not to a doctor. To Evan. "He used your trust," Lena whispered. I couldn't answer because she was right. The report did not feel like an evaluation anymore. It felt like my marriage had been searched for useful pieces. I kept thinking about ordinary conversations. The kind couples forget 5 minutes later. Small worries. Late-night confessions. The guilt I trusted only him to understand. Reading those words inside an official report made every memory feel different. Not because I had shared them. Because someone had decided they could be turned into evidence against me. I placed the report beside my duty schedule and checked the date Vale claimed to have assessed me. The numbers did not fit. On that date, I had been assigned to work that was not listed in any public schedule. The report claimed I had shown certain behavior at home during hours when I could not have been there. Lena studied the timestamps. This file was created after the date printed on the report. So the assessment was written backward. It appears that way. For the first time, we had a mistake we could measure. But proving where I had actually been created another problem. Lena opened the public portion of my service record, then shook her head. This won't be enough. Why? Because the part that confirms your location is restricted. I looked again at the false date beneath Vale's signature. The lie was visible. The truth was sealed. The preliminary access log arrived the next morning. Lena placed it between us and pointed to one entry. This account opened your record 3 days before Vale signed his report. The account belonged to a military contractor. That did not prove who had used it. It only proved someone outside my care team had reached information they should never have seen. I read the timestamps again. The pattern was there. Each access came shortly before another document appeared. One before the sleep assessment. Another before the section about memory loss. A third before Vale described my duty schedule. This wasn't random, I said. No, Lena replied. But we still need the person behind the account. Lena looked at me for a long moment. I know this feels personal, she said. That's because it is. She submitted a deeper review through JAG channels. The first response linked the contractor account to a records service that had previously worked with Vale's clinic. The room felt smaller. Evan had given Vale my private words. Now someone connected to Vale may have reached my official records. This was no longer only about what happened inside my marriage. Someone had crossed into my military life. That evening, I opened Vale's report again. One section claimed I had repeatedly chosen the Navy over my family. The wording made my chest tighten. Months earlier, after missing dinner because of duty, I had told Evan, sometimes I feel guilty that everyone has to wait for me. In Vale's report, that became evidence that I lacked emotional balance and could not separate service from home. My trust had been rewritten as a symptom. For one sharp moment, I wanted to walk downstairs and place the report in front of Evan. I wanted to watch him explain it. Then I remembered what Lena had said. The moment he knew, the rest could disappear. So I closed the file and waited. A few minutes later, Evan entered the room. "You've been quiet," he said. "Are you feeling overwhelmed again?" Again. He said it as though we had discussed it before. I looked at him and understood the question was not concern. It was another sentence he might give to Vale. I began reviewing Evan's company expenses under the vague category of consulting. Most entries were ordinary. Then one name appeared again. Vale Behavioral Health. The first payment matched the week Vale created his earliest report about me. A second came before the section about my memory. Another appeared before he wrote about my duty schedule. The descriptions said nothing useful. Professional services. Advisory support. But the dates told a different story. I sent the records to Lena. "This confirms the company paid him," she said. "It does not prove what they paid him to do." Not yet. The payments had started months before Rosa's call. That meant the report had not grown from sudden concern. Someone had been building it quietly. Noah Pierce's name appeared on every transaction. He was Evan's younger brother and the company accountant. I contacted him without mentioning Vale. "I need to understand several consulting payments," I said. "You should ask Evan. Your signature is on them." I process what he sends me. His answer came too quickly. Noah forwarded copies of the authorization forms. At first, everything looked normal. Then I checked the electronic history. The documents had been completed before Noah's signature appeared. "You signed these after they were finalized," I said. There was a pause. "That happens sometimes. Did you review them?" Another pause. "I told you. Evan handles the details." He was not denying the payments. He was avoiding what they meant. I looked again at the signing order. Evan approved the transactions first. The payment descriptions were added next. Noah's signature came last, after there was nothing left for him to change. Maybe Noah knew everything. Maybe Evan had used him as a name on paper. Either way, he was now part of the trail. And for the first time, I wondered whether Noah was helping my husband hide the truth, or whether he was being prepared to take the blame for it. I started reviewing the company's public financial records alongside the business transactions Evan had always managed himself. The numbers looked worse than I expected. Property after property had been pledged as collateral. Loan deadlines were approaching. Cash flow had been shrinking for months. The company was still operating. Barely. I built a second timeline beside the one we already had. One tracked the false psychological reports. The other tracked the money. They moved almost side by side. Then I found a projected funding document. The amount highlighted at the bottom was almost identical to the value of my inheritance trust. I stared at it for a long time. Maybe the reports had never been the final goal. Maybe they were only clearing the path to something much larger. The pressure inside that company had been growing long before Rosa ever picked up the phone. The next afternoon, Margaret arrived carrying soup and wearing the same gentle smile she always used when she wanted something. "You've been working too hard," she said. "Maybe it's time to think about yourself." "I am. You don't have to prove anything anymore. The Navy has taken enough from you." Then she looked around the house. A simpler life would be healthier. Fewer responsibilities. One owner instead of complicated arrangements. She never asked directly about the house. She spoke about peace, about family, about sacrifice. But every sentence somehow circled back to my property. I listened without arguing. Then she said a number. The exact balance of my inheritance trust. I had never told her that number. Not once. When Evan came home, he let his mother continue speaking. He barely interrupted. He simply watched me. "A good wife knows when to let go," Margaret said softly. "A family survives because someone chooses sacrifice." For years, I would have believed her. I would have asked myself whether I really had been asking too much. Whether another compromise could save the family. But every new piece of evidence had changed the meaning of those old conversations. Now sacrifice sounded less like love. And more like permission. Evan finally spoke. "No one's forcing you to do anything." But he never looked away from my face. He wasn't waiting for an answer. He was waiting for a reaction. For one angry word. One raised voice. One mistake they could remember. I felt the trap closing around me. Months of false reports. Months of financial pressure. Months of carefully chosen conversations. None of it had started with Rosa's call. That afternoon had only revealed a plan already in motion. So I smiled. I thanked Margaret for the soup. I told Evan I was tired. Then I walked upstairs before either of them could collect the response they had been waiting for. For the first time, I understood they didn't need me to agree. They needed me to lose control. I placed Vale's report beside Evan's messages and the notes Margaret had left behind. The same phrases appeared again and again. Unable to manage stress. Poor judgment. Risk to herself. Unable to control personal property. What had looked like separate concerns now felt arranged. I showed the pattern to Lena. "These aren't just medical phrases," she said. "What are they?" "They're the kind of language used to justify emergency intervention." The words sat heavily between us. Evan had not been collecting examples to prove I was tired. He had been collecting reasons to take decisions out of my hands. I returned to the camera footage and enlarged the letter lying on my bed. The image was not clear enough to read every sentence, but the opening line carried my name. The closing looked like a goodbye. My stomach turned. They wanted this to look like I wrote it. Lena did not answer immediately. If they paired that letter with the medication and Vale's report, it could support the claim that you were a danger to yourself. I had spent years protecting people under pressure. Now my husband was trying to turn that same pressure into evidence against me. We still did not have the physical letter, so I searched the automatic backups connected to our home system. One saved draft appeared under a generic file name. The creation date matched the week before Rosa's call. I checked the metadata twice. The file had been opened and edited through the account linked to the laptop Evan used every evening. For several seconds, I could only stare at the screen. He had not simply lied about me. He had practiced leaving my final words behind. The report supplied the diagnosis. The room supplied the image. And the letter was meant to make the entire story feel complete. Lena found a draft filing schedule later that afternoon. She read it once, then slowly pushed the page toward me. If this timeline is accurate, they may file before you finish building your case. I looked at the dates again. I had been thinking in weeks. They were working in days. If I confront Evan now, he'll know exactly what I found. And if you wait, Lena said quietly, a temporary order could already be in motion. The room fell silent. For the first time, my silence carried a price. I opened a notebook and listed every piece of evidence we still needed. The original camera file, the access records, the payment trail, the restricted military confirmation. Nothing else mattered until those pieces were secured. Lena watched me finish the list. I can request the process, she said, but I can't confirm the restricted records myself. Before leaving, she shared one last update. Part of the file had already been sent to Evan's civil attorney. The clock had started. That night I sat alone, thinking about every moment I had chosen peace over confrontation. Each time Evan dismissed my concerns. Each time I convinced myself that staying quiet protected our marriage. Now I could finally see the pattern. Every silence had given him another opportunity to build his story. Fear had kept me quiet. Discipline would keep me quiet now. But they were no longer the same thing. The next morning I called Lena. I want the full access investigation. You're certain? Yes. I won't spend another day defending his version of me. The request was filed before noon. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for Evan to make the next move. Then the legal draft finally reached me through the proper process. As I read each page, every piece fell into place. Vale's report supported mental incapacity. The medication supported immediate danger. The letter suggested self-harm. The bedroom scene connected everything together. Near the end, I found the section that mattered most. My home. My inheritance trust. My authority to manage both. That was the real target. The reports had never been written to end my marriage. They had been written to take away my right to decide. I closed the draft and looked at Evan across the room. He thought the plan was almost complete. I had just learned where to break it. I placed every timestamp on one line. The camera footage. The altered metadata. The payments to Vale. The access logs. The repeated phrases. The order in which each file had been created. Once they were aligned, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Evan's questions came first. Then someone opened my records. Then Vale produced another report. Then the company paid him. Each step prepared the next. Lena studied the timeline in silence. This wasn't a collection of separate documents, I said. It was one system. She looked at me differently. You've done this before. I had spent weeks pretending my attention to detail was nothing more than caution. It wasn't. I'm a cryptologic warfare officer. That explains everything. No, I said. It only explains why I saw the pattern. Lena's expression changed, but I kept my voice even. My work involves verifying information, tracing changes, and preserving data when someone is trying to distort it. I told her only what I was allowed to say. Years earlier, I had helped verify the chain of intelligence during a hostage rescue at sea. Parts of that mission remained restricted. So did the official record of what I had done. Evan had never understood my role. He thought I handled schedules and paperwork. That mistake had allowed him to believe I would never notice the structure inside his lies. Lena looked back at the timeline. Who supervised the mission? Rear Admiral Helen Ward. The name from the sealed record finally had meaning. But meaning was not enough. We still needed someone with the authority to confirm it. If stories about quiet strength, family, and justice mean something to you, I'd be honored if you subscribed before we continue. The most important part of this story is still ahead. Lena closed the file. There's only one person who can verify what's sealed. Ward. She nodded. The question was no longer whether the truth existed. It was whether Rear Admiral Ward would agree to bring it into the room. I met Noah with copies of the signature history and the internal approval records. I didn't accuse him. I simply placed the documents in front of him. He studied them in silence until he reached an email Evan had never expected him to see. The message described exactly how the consulting payments would be explained if anyone questioned them. At the bottom was one sentence that drained the color from Noah's face. If necessary, accounting approved the transfers without authorization. That's me, he whispered. Yes. He was going to blame me. I nodded. The timeline says he already planned to. For a long moment, Noah stared at the screen. Then he quietly forwarded every internal email he still had. I signed the paperwork, he admitted. But I never knew what he was building. Those emails answered another question. Margaret had known far more than I wanted to believe. In one message, she called my inheritance trust the only realistic way to save the company. In another, she urged Evan not to delay because Claire still trusts us. My house, my trust, my Navy career. To her, they had become financial solutions. Then I found an email that stopped me completely. Margaret suggested describing my military absences as proof that I had become emotionally unstable. The wording was almost identical to a paragraph in Vale's report. She had not simply supported Evan. She had helped write the story about me. I kept waiting to feel angry. Instead, I only felt tired. By then, I no longer wanted her approval. I only wanted the truth preserved. Noah looked up. I'll testify to what I signed. You understand that won't erase your part. I know. It's the only honest thing I have left. Later that evening, Lena opened the restricted confirmation page. One name appeared above the approval line. Rear Admiral Helen Ward. The officer who had supervised my classified mission. The officer who could verify why the timeline in Vale's report was impossible. Before we could move further, another message arrived from Evan's legal team. It claimed I was exaggerating my military service to distract from my psychological problems. I read the accusation once. Then I looked back at Ward's name. The truth already existed. Now we needed someone willing to speak it aloud. Rear Admiral Helen Ward appeared through the formal verification process the following morning. She did not speak about my marriage. She did not speak about Evan. She answered only what fell within her authority. Was Lieutenant Commander Bennett on active assignment during the dates listed in Dr. Vale's report? Yes. Could she have been at her residence during those hours? No. The room went still. Ward confirmed that my role involved verifying information, tracing changes, and preserving evidence under pressure. She also confirmed that the missing portions of my record were legally restricted, not absent. Then she looked directly at the hearing officer. Lieutenant Commander Bennett was recognized for maintaining the integrity of a sensitive evidence chain during a maritime hostage rescue operation. She offered no praise beyond what the record supported. She did not need to. The gap Evan had tried to use disappeared in a few sentences. As she stepped away from the table, she paused beside me. Stand steady, Lieutenant Commander. I will, Admiral. I watched her walk away without another word. She hadn't defended me. She had simply confirmed the truth. That mattered more than any speech could have. For the first time since Rosa called, I felt the weight begin to shift. On the dates he claimed I had been unstable at home, I had not been home at all. I watched her leave without another word. Ward withdrew once the military questions were complete. Then Lena presented the verified access logs. Each unauthorized entry into my record appeared shortly before Vale produced another report. One access came before the section on sleep. Another came before the claims about memory. A third came before he described my duty schedule. The account belonged to a contractor connected to a record service that had worked with Vale's clinic. Evan and Vale could still deny giving direct instructions. But the timing no longer stood alone. The payments matched. The emails matched. Margaret's language matched the report. And the access pattern matched the creation of each document. Lena confirmed that the original files had remained unchanged from the moment they were preserved. I did not look at Evan. Recognition was not the same as victory. It only meant the truth had finally entered the room with authority behind it. The hearing officer reviewed the timeline, then asked the question everything now depended on. Were these separate acts of poor judgment? Or were they all parts of one coordinated plan? Rosa was asked to describe only what she had directly seen. She folded her hands and took a slow breath. I saw Mr. Bennett place the bottle beside the wine glass. And the folder? Mrs. Bennett brought it into the bedroom. What did the other man do? He opened the papers. He pointed to the bed. Then he checked the time. Evan's attorney suggested Rosa had misunderstood an ordinary family meeting. She did not argue. I know what I saw, she said. I also know what I did not hear. What do you mean? No one sounded worried about Claire. They were worried about when she would arrive. Rosa explained why she had hidden in the laundry room, when she called me, and when Margaret reached toward the camera. Every detail matched the timestamps. She did not guess. She did not exaggerate. That made her testimony harder to dismiss. I wanted to thank Rosa. Instead, I simply caught her eye and nodded. She gave the smallest nod back. She understood. Neither of us smiled. There was nothing to celebrate yet. The hardest part still waited ahead. But in that quiet moment, I realized courage didn't always sound loud. Sometimes it looked exactly like Rosa choosing to tell the truth anyway. Then Vale was asked to provide the original clinical records supporting his report. There were none. No appointment record. No consent form. No intake notes. No examination. Vale called the document a preliminary assessment based on concerns reported by family members. But the metadata showed the file had been created after the date printed on it. The company payments matched its revisions. The access logs matched the information added later. Then Lena displayed one paragraph from Margaret's email beside a paragraph from Vale's report. The wording was nearly identical. Vale had not evaluated me. He had assembled me from other people's statements. The report that described me as unstable had no examination behind it, no valid date beneath it, and no independent language inside it. For weeks, Evan had treated that document like proof. Now it looked exactly like what it was. A story written first, and a diagnosis added afterward. I stood in the bedroom one last time before the house was listed. The walls looked ordinary. The bed was gone. The camera had already been removed. Nothing in the room showed what had happened there. But I remembered every detail. For a while, I considered keeping the house because Evan had tried to take it from me. Then I understood that ownership was not the same as belonging. I sold it. Part of the money went into a fund for service members facing financial abuse inside their marriages. I wanted them to have help before silence became a weapon against them. Rosa worried that she had lost more than a job. You gave me the truth when everyone else was trying to hide it, I told her. Now let me help you build something that belongs to you. She opened her own home care service a few months later. I became her first client. Leaving the house was not running away. It was the first time I chose where my life would begin again. Not long after that, I walked out of Norfolk following a small promotion ceremony. There were no cameras. No dramatic speeches. Just a few officers, quiet handshakes, and the familiar sound of the harbor behind us. Rear Admiral Ward approached before I left. Congratulations, Lieutenant Commander Bennett. Thank you, Admiral. She saluted. I returned it. That was all. I did not look for the people who had doubted me. I did not need them to understand anymore. My work was still mine. My name was still mine. And my future no longer depended on someone else's version of me. Looking back, the house did not fall apart on the day Rosa called. That call only showed me it had stopped being a home long before I was ready to admit it. The truth did not destroy my life. It saved the years I still had left. If you have ever had to choose between protecting someone you loved and protecting the truth, I would love to hear your thoughts. Share your story in the comments. I read every one.